Yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to Block Sports. This is Michael Jefferson, and I say again to you, welcome to Block Sports. It's been a great day for everyone that's out there. And the one thing that I have to say, it's good to be here in a new year. We took a week off just to make sure we just kind of revitalize the juices, just to get back into the flow of things. But for the most part and for the better part of everything, I think I'm pretty good now. Had a chance to be with family, be with friends. Was down in Mississippi for a week visiting family and friends. I had a chance to eat some just good home cooked food, and it was just great to be with family again. Hopefully, most of you had a chance to have a great weekend, have a great time with family, just to get revitalized, just to get your juices flowing again, and see what 2023 has in line for you. I know 2022 for some of you could have been very challenging, and may have had some your ups and downs. I know we had, and I know I had my ups and downs, but guess what? I'm looking forward to having just an absolutely awesome 2023 in broadcasting, also teach, video production, and also drone services. Having a good time with my family. My twins, they graduate from Jackson State University on April the 29th. So guess what? We will have 2 more completely out of our pockets. Yes. So we will actually get a raise. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things my wife has been talking about. I don't know how enthusiastic my children are about it, but my wife has been pretty much dancing a jig, looking at what type of raise she's going to get and the kind of raise we're going to get in the household from them graduating. One of my daughters already has a job lined up. She's already working part-time. And the other one, she's trying to decide whether or not she wants to go full-time or go to grad school. And it's a beautiful time to be in the house of the Jeffersons. But either way, for those of you who are out there listening to the show or may listen to the show later on, just look forward to having a wonderful, great new year as you plan your new day, as you plan your new year, as you look forward to great and new, better, bigger, brighter adventures. But today, before we get into it, on last night, I'm quite sure quite a few of you were watching television, and even though this show is specifically here to discuss HBCU sports, I would be remiss if I did not speak about the incident that happened on the field, and this was an NFL football game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. And there was a young man, 24 years of age, by the name of Damar Hamlin. And for those of you who may not be aware, is that this young man, after making what is considered to be a routine tackle on a member of the Cincinnati Bengals, Damar Hamlin, after the tackle, stood up, but a few seconds later, he hit the ground. And as we are so accustomed to seeing 95, 96, 97% of the players moving on the ground or doing something while they're on the ground, he didn't. And make a long story short, a member of his family, he was just interviewed by CNN. And one of the things that he indicated was that the young man had to be resuscitated twice. Twice. We look at this and we look at these players as invincible. Yes, they may hurt their hamstring, they may break a leg or break bones, break fingers, but they're not invincible. I coach, and I still call myself a coach, even though I haven't coached in a few years. But I coached kids from the age of 5 all the way up to Olympians. And I had the pleasure, the privilege of coaching my daughter in track and field. And the one thing I can easily say is, because I know what I endured when I ran track. I know what I put my body through when I ran track. I know what my coach required out of me when I ran track. And I went above and beyond all of that. But every day I went out and I coached my daughter, and each day I actually went out and coached someone else's child, I was actually concerned on whether or not I was pushing them too hard, whether or not I was requiring too much of them, because I know what I required of myself. But my concern was whether or not they had, including my own daughter, whether or not they had that same type of push, that same type of drive, that same type of desire, and whether or not I overtrained, which caused them to pull a muscle, hurt themselves, or even worse. But every student that was out there, let me rephrase that. The majority of the students that were out there, they were doing something that they enjoyed. My daughter enjoyed what she was doing. As a matter of fact, if I asked her to go outside and film something in the rain, she'd be like, okay, not a problem. Do you have something to wrap the camera with? She would not have any issues in going out. That's what one of the events that we actually coached in Cincinnati, happened to be in Cincinnati, where Damar Hamlin was playing the game with the Buffalo Bills. She had to participate in rain. After that day, she was like, oh, I love this. I have no problems doing anything in the rain. And here we are, we're skeptical because we don't have an umbrella. And she's going out without an umbrella. No issues, no problems whatsoever. But I was concerned. And here, Hamlin's mother was in the stands watching him play the sport that he enjoyed more than anything else. And she, fortunately, I don't know if to say fortunately or unfortunately, but fortunately she was there to be with her son during this incident. Instead of having to be flown in from somewhere, she was able to ride in the ambulance with him to be with her son. Currently, he's in critical condition. A lot of people would say unfortunately, but I would say fortunately he's in critical condition, because because the medical team was there, they were able to take care of him. They were able to resuscitate him twice. Once on the field, and I cannot remember if it was once on the way or once when they made it to the hospital, but it was twice. And had it not been for the quick response of the medical team of the Buffalo Bills and the medical team that was there in Cincinnati, this conversation could probably be a lot different. Now, he still has a tough road to climb, a tough hill to climb, because just prior to this show, and one of the reasons why I'm late is because I was trying to glean additional information on his condition, and he's currently on his stomach because there are additional issues with him being able to there are additional issues with his heart, and he's not out of the woods yet. So what I say to everyone that's out there listening, keep him in your prayers, because if this were your son, I'm quite sure you would ask us for your prayers as well. But make sure you keep that young man in your prayers so that he can go home to his family. Forget football. Forget sports. This is about life and death. No one really cares about football. You saw, if you watched the game last night, grown men crying because that was their friend. That was their teammate. And they did not want to see that happen because no one had experienced that. And fortunately, the league, the coaches. No one there even thought about starting the game over again after they realized the magnitude of the trauma that had taken place with Hamlin. And that was good, that no one even thought about playing the game again on that night. And that was great. And the reason why I bring this up is because of the incident that took place during the Celebration Bowl between Jackson State and North Carolina Central, where in that game in overtime, there was a young man for Jackson State, and I'm not even going to call his name because I don't want distraught fans, and I'm going to go all the way there, who are idiotic in saying he dropped the ball that caused Jackson State to lose. Guess what? This is my show, and I'm going to say it. You're an idiot if you are still frustrated and if you're mad at that young man for dropping the ball. This is just a doggone game. And here you are, you're threatening his life because he made a mistake and didn't catch the ball. I'm a Jackson State grad. I'm a third-generation graduate of Jackson State University. If you cut me, I guarantee you I will more than likely bleed blue because everything I do is blue. But to threaten a young man's life, and if anyone actually had the opportunity to watch that game last night and saw what that young man went through being 24 years of age, forget playing football ever again. Will he be able to walk? Will he be able to function as he used to? That's the concern now that each and every one of us should have. Not about football, but life in general. So when you watch a game, when you see one of these talented athletes, they make a mistake, fumble the ball. They make a mistake and not make a basket. They make a mistake and not lean towards for the tape, or they end up being the last person running across the finish line. Just say to them, you know what, doggone it, wow, my team lost. But I hope they did their best. And we move on. Why? Because it's just a game. And fans out there, regardless of your team, whether it's Jackson State, Bowie State, North Carolina Central, Alcorn, Southern, Fayetteville State, Russ College, Suno. It doesn't matter who you are that's out there. Please, guys, just remember, this is just a game. Albany State, Benedict, Kentucky State, Central State. It doesn't matter what school you are, who you're representing. South Carolina State, it's still just a game, guys. And for the other schools that I did not mention by name, Prairie View, Grambling, Mississippi Valley, Shaw, guys, it's just a game. So please remember that. Please remember, it's just a game. And for the student athletes that are out there, that are constantly working as hard as you possibly can to be the best at what you do, continue. Philander, Dillard, just do your best and stay healthy. And tonight, what I want to do is talk about HBCU basketball and some of the things that has happened this year. Or should I say, I want to take a look at the standings of the basketball season so far. Some conferences are already in basketball season, going through conference play. Some conferences have not. But we're going to take a look at those. But for those fans that are out there that are diehard fans that are like me, guys, remember, it's just a game. So let's go ahead and take a look at the standings of HBCU conferences. Unfortunately, I won't have the GCAC conference for you tonight. I hope to have it for you next week, but unfortunately, I will not have it for you tonight. But we will make sure that next week I will have their standings, games that are being played, and what they have currently done thus far. So let's move toward these slates of conference teams. So what we have here with the CIAA, as you can see so far for 2022-2023, as you can see, Virginia State is on top of the world right now, and they are currently leading everyone in the Northern Division with a 3-0 record. And as you can see, they are 3-0 and 10-4 overall. Now, even though Virginia Union is 1-1, they have the best record in the Northern Division, and they are currently 11-2. Wow, great! Continue to move forward. But as you can see, Bowie State is 2-1, but they are only 4-11 in conference play. 4-11 overall, but 2-1 in conference play. Wow, they have a long ways to go, but they've started off pretty good, at least in conference play. Now, as you can see in the Southern Division, Claflin, before they started conference play, they were 10-0. So that lets you know that getting into conference play, you have more teams that are more familiar with you, and because of their familiarity, guess what happens? They know how to beat you. Other teams that you're not familiar with, you can go in, sneak in, and win. But as you can see here, Claflin, they're 2-1 in conference play, 10-1 overall, and they're tied with Winston-Salem, Livingstone, and Fayetteville State. But as you can see, Winston-Salem, they're 10-2. So between those two schools, wow, you have 4 schools that have winning. 5 schools that have winning records. I guess you could say 5, maybe want to say 6, because Shaw in the Northern Division, even though they're breaking even, but they're still 7-7. And Livingstone is 6-6. But Livingstone along with Fayetteville State, but Fayetteville State is 7-8. And they lost their last game. But I can tell you one thing, this is shaping up to be a very good basketball season for these teams. And one thing I can say, the CIAA is still the #1 basketball conference. I know we have the MEAC. I understand we have the SWAC conference. Those are supposed to be the big boys out there playing Division I games. But when it comes to actually being the HBCU conference that garners the most eyes, and even ESPN is starting to pay close attention. Other networks are starting to pay close attention on what the CIAA brings to the table, because when it comes to a party during tournament time, no one does it better than the CIAA. And so I'm hoping to get to at least to the tournament, at least one game. I don't care when it is. I know my teaching schedule is going to interfere with me somewhere along the way, but my gosh, I got to get there, because I've watched them, but the party outside of the tournament, even though I know we have a couple of months before we get there, but the party outside of the tournament is really what happens. So hopefully I can get there and enjoy part of the party. But let's go ahead and continue and see what's going on in the SIAC, because I will provide you with the schedule of the CIAA for the games that are currently being played, and the schedule for the following week. But let's go ahead and move forward. And right now, I only have the men's schedule. I will make sure that next week I break down the men and women, because there's some exciting ball being played on the women's side of the bracket. But tonight, I'm just going to go in mostly on the men's side, but I will touch base a little bit on the women's side tonight. And as we take a look at the SIAC, some games that were played on last night. And as you can see, you had Miles College defeating Albany State by a score of 62-59. Tuskegee defeated Allen by a score of 81-52. And you also have Savannah State defeating Lemoyne Owens by a score of 65-62. Spring Hill lost to Benedict by a score of 82-66. And Clark Atlanta defeated Central State by a score of 80-74. And the one thing I have to say to you guys is that this conference, too, has a lot to offer to everyone. And once you see the standing of these teams, because I can tell you Lemoyne Owens, as well as a lot of other schools, it's going to be really, I'm just looking forward to this basketball season overall. And I'm going to get into more in-depth coverage of each school, each conference, how they break down, because what I wanted to do tonight is just give you an overview of where we are, what's going on, and how these teams are faring. Because later on down the line, for the rest of this year, basketball season is going to be tough. It's just going to be really tough this year. And well, I'll get into the other conferences. I'm almost getting ahead of myself. But going back and let's taking a look at the SIAC standings for the men. And then here we are. We have Fort Valley State. They're currently leading the pack with the 5-1 conference record, and they're 7-5 overall. Whereas you have Savannah State one game behind with the their conference record is 4-2, but they're 6-4 overall. Followed by Benedict at 3-3 conference play, and they're 5-6 overall. Man, that's close quarters. But down in the Western Division, should I say in the West Division, you have Kentucky State that's leading the fray, and they're at 5-1, 6-2 overall. So Kentucky State has gotten off to a great start, and right behind them, nipping at their heels, you have Miles College and Lemoyne Owens, as well as Tuskegee. Here they are at 5-2. Just a half game behind Kentucky State. But if you look at the records, oh my gosh, you have Miles at 9-3, Lemoyne Owens at 10-4, as well as Tuskegee being 10-4 overall. And this is shaping up to be a great year. And then you have Lane College in the West. They're at 3-3, 5-7 overall record. Spring Hill, as well as Central State. Central State, they've only won 3 games overall, and those 3 games happen to be in conference play. And then Spring Hill is 6-6 overall. But let's see what the West Division is going to be. In football, this year it was the East, but in basketball, as you can see, it's looking like everything is going to come out of the West. And if that's the case, then I can tell you, because I can tell you Lemoyne Owens and Tuskegee, they're going to be tough teams to beat coming out of the West. But what Kentucky State is having to say right now, everybody's looking up at us right now. So we'll see if that trend continues, and especially what happens next week, because we'll have a lot more to discuss, a lot more to talk about, and a lot more to glean for what these teams are actually bringing to the table. Now, let's go to the MEAC conference. And as we take a look at the MEAC conference, I'm going to look at the games that are currently coming up, because they have not started conference play as of yet. And as you saw, the SIAC conference has already started conference play, and they're really starting to really kick butt against each other. And as you can see here with the MEAC, you have coming up on Wednesday, you have, or should I say, tonight you have North Carolina Central. They're playing tonight at home. Then you have Morgan State and Norfolk State. They're playing on Wednesday. But then on Saturday is when they begin their conference play. And as you can see, North Carolina Central will visit Morgan State. Maryland Eastern Shore will visit Norfolk State. South Carolina State will visit Coppin State. And Howard will entertain Delaware State. So these games, as you can see, will all take place at 4 p.m. on Saturday. And that will be the first iteration of the MEAC entering into conference play. And as I bring up their current overall records, you will see that Norfolk State is currently leading the fray. And I know a buddy of mine, Orlando Hughes, quite sure he's kicking his heels right now because their overall record happens to be 9-5, 9 wins against 5 losses, even though they lost their last game, as you can see. But Maryland Eastern Shore, they're coming up and nipping at their heels, having won their last 4 games, bringing their overall record to 7-7. And of course, you have right behind them, you have North Carolina Central at 6-7. Howard University is at 7-9, and of course, everyone else, as you can see, with losing records. South Carolina State won their last game, as well as Morgan State. But we'll see when they enter conference play on Saturday, and also whether or not any of those other teams will have games prior to Tuesday when we go live. We'll give you all your updates for men and women's scores when it comes up to that. And now we come to the SWAC conference. And in terms of SWAC play, we have a lot of schools that have been playing, as well, especially the MEAC. And as a matter of fact, I do want to go back to the MEAC here real quick, because most of these schools, as well as the SWAC, they have been playing against what is considered in football Power 5 schools. And I know Coppin State traditionally has had very good success against these the major schools, or the larger schools out there, as well as some of the other schools in the SWAC. And as we take a look at the conference play for the SWAC, here we are. And these games were played last night. And these were the first games being played in SWAC conference games. And as you can see, Jackson State went on the road to defeat Alcorn. And as you can see, that score is 67-66. My oldest twin, I know her boyfriend is kind of chomping at the bit. I should give him a call and say, how you doing? You lost again. But I'm not going to do that. That would be really petty. And I know I have one of my first cousins. She may still be mad at me because of how I feel about Alcorn. But it's just a rivalry. And this is something that if you graduated from an HBCU, only we can really have fun against each other. Anyone else on the outside, if someone on the outside who did not go to an HBCU said anything negative about an Alcorn, Southern, Grambling, Fayetteville State, Bowie State, it doesn't matter the school, Albany State, it doesn't matter the school. Now they have to deal with me. Why? Because you know nothing about an HBCU. Nothing at all about an HBCU. Until you've gone to an HBCU and has experienced an HBCU, don't talk to me. You have people, and I'm going to go here because I'm talking about the SWAC now, and you have people on the outside that supported a former coach for Jackson State. And even though he said negative things, he didn't know a lot of the stuff that was going on because he didn't take the time to ask a lot of questions. And if he had taken the time to ask a lot of questions, he would have gotten all of the answers. And for the people who are on the outside speaking on his behalf, Unfortunately, he didn't correct him, even after he found out the information. Shame on you. Shame on you. And I hope you find out that the grass ain't always green on the other side. It's just grass. And that's all it is. But let me continue. I digress for a moment. But let me continue on with the SWAC conference. And as we continue to talk about the scores, here you are, you have Mississippi Valley traveling to Alabama State, and they lost by a score of 70-61. Much better production out of Mississippi Valley instead of being, unfortunately, being blown out. Bethune-Cookman traveled to Florida A&M, regular rival here, and that score was 67-59. Alabama A&M entertained UAPB, and they defeated UAPB by a score of 66-59. Prairie View defeated Grambling, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that, by a score of 61-60. And Southern University traveled to Texas Southern, another conference power, and they defeated them by a score of 77-76. And looking at those two games, especially those last two games, with Prairie View defeating Grambling and Texas Southern losing to Southern, Grambling has been playing some really, really good ball of late. But unfortunately, and Grambling has also defeated a couple of schools that are in some of what we would consider Power 5 schools. And they went into their den and they defeated them. But yet and still, when it comes to conference play is just so much different, because as we take a look at a team who was number one overall in Division I basketball, even though I know we're talking about HBCU sports, but here we are. Look at what happened to another team, Purdue, number one in the nation, got into conference play, played against Rutgers, and what happened? They lost on their home court to Rutgers, the number one team in the nation, and they ended up losing. So just like what Grambling has done, and as you can see, and I'll go back here to these scores, you see Grambling, even though it was by 1 point, but Prairie View is saying not so fast, not so fast, not so fast, because we're still on top of the hill. Same thing with Texas Southern, because even though Texas Southern did not win the SWAC, but yet and still Texas Southern is still in the top half of the SWAC conference. And they ended up losing to Southern University. Southern is just always there, just a thorn in everybody's side. They just never go away. They're just like cockroaches. But that's another story. So you just have to forgive me. But I mean, I'm just being real. Southern is always there. When you think you may have Southern down, here they come again. And all of a sudden, they're ending up either winning the conference or in second or third place. Doesn't matter the sport. Southern University, they just have a great athletic program, and you just have to give it to them. When you think you have them down, here they come again. So that, and you just have to give kudos to their athletic director and to their coaches for always putting together a great team. And I have to give kudos again to Coach Eric Dooley, because I do respect that man, and I have been following him in his career. And even though, except for when they play Jackson State, I pray that he has much success in all of his games that he plays. And let's continue on with the standings. And as you can see with the games that were played, you have 4 teams that are 5-9 in the conference play. I mean, overall record. And they are 1-0 in conference play because they won their first game in conference play. Then, of course, Alabama State and Jackson State They won their first game, but as you can see, they have not been faring well outside of conference play. Alabama State is 3-11, followed by Jackson State being 2-12. But yet and still, they won their first game. But here you are with Grambling, 7-6, and the one thing I have to say about Grambling is that with Grambling, they have gone and they have played all comers. And I'm very surprised that even though it was Prairie View has won the conference on a few occasions, but I'm still surprised with the way Grambling has played that they lost to Prairie View. But guess what? They played Prairie View on their home court. And again, when you go into conference play, literally all bets are off. It doesn't matter if you're playing the number one team in conference or the worst team in what you think is the worst team in conference play. And as I go back, and if you notice these scores, Jackson State won by 1. Alabama State won by 9. Bethune-Cookman won by 8. Alabama A&M, they won by 7. Grambling lost by 1. Southern won by 1. So no double-digit beatdowns here in this game. A lot of people would have said, "Oh yeah, Alabama State, they're going to run Mississippi Valley off the court." But guess what? They didn't. A lot of people say, "Well, 9 points is not a close game." Yet and still, last year they didn't fare so well. But this year, as you can see, they're playing a little bit better. So hopefully this year, and as you can see with the standings, even though they are 1-4 with this game, hopefully they end up playing a lot better. Every team that, as you can see with this, even though you have a lot of teams 1-14, 2-10, Jackson State being 2-12, Alabama State being 3-11, Grambling, of course, I point them out because they are the only team with a winning record in the SWAC conference. All of these teams have played some of the major schools in basketball. Yes, they've come up short, with the exception of Grambling. They have played really good ball this year. And that's the one thing I can say about each and every team that has played. And as we look at the women's team for basketball, I won't be bringing that up today, but the one thing I can say is that Jackson State, again, is on top of the heap, and the teams that won on last night were Jackson State, Alabama State, Southern University, Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman again, and Grambling won last night. And the team that sits on top, of course, is Jackson State with a 4-7 overall record because they have gone up against some heavy hitters during their basketball play, and they have barely lost. And the reason why I want to point out Jackson State is because a lot of teams, they don't want to play Jackson State. Not, should I say, let me be clear, they don't want to play Jackson State women, because one team that they played against was Texas Tech, at Texas Tech, and they defeated them by a score of 69-63 on Texas Tech's home court. And that was a game that they didn't anticipate, and they also defeated Louisiana. I believe that was a tournament that was being played, and they defeated them by a score of 70-41. So guess what? Don't play with Jackson State this year. Went to UCLA, and they lost to UCLA in California by a score of 72-60. Not getting blown out. And even though they went to North Carolina, their first game they didn't fare well, losing to them by a score of 91-59, and the second game to Colorado by a score of 77-53. But the last few games that Jackson State has played, going into conference play, they defeated Southeastern Louisiana by a score of 60-51. So they started the game before conference play ready to take on all players. And the team that I believe that they truly have to watch out for, and I'm going to say this, is Bethune-Cookman. Now, even though Bethune-Cookman is only 2-9, but entering into the SWAC, coming from the MEAC, a lot of individuals believe that this would be the team that would really give Jackson State fits. But it's always been Southern and Alcorn. So this year, the question is, will Bethune-Cookman rise up and say, we're here, and we're here to compete? And, of course, they won their first game against Florida A&M. And the next game is going to be against Grambling. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see how Bethune-Cookman plays against Grambling. And then after Grambling, then they go into Southern. And that third game is going to tell a whole lot. If they can defeat Southern in Southern, then we can easily say, okay, Bethune is here, and Bethune is actually here to make waves in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. But until then, we shall see, because right now Jackson State sits atop the SWAC conference, followed by Southern and Grambling, as far as I'm concerned. And Bethune-Cookman is trying to knock on the door to say, don't count us out just yet. But as I said, you have Jackson State, Alabama State, Southern, Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman, and Grambling, who are sitting on top of the women's division for the SWAC conference. And we'll see whether or not this continues. But I only wanted to cover just to show you where we were in conference play in terms of where the schools currently are right now, how they're currently playing, what we're looking at, and how we think that they will fare the rest of the way. And when we come back next week, we're going to take a close look at how these teams are going to fare, what we think they're going to do the rest of the year, and hopefully I'll be able to have a couple of guests on talking about each conference. If not, then guess what? You'll see my face once again talking about HBCU sports. We will also talk about the GCAC conference, have their scoreboard up and going, talk about what they're doing the rest of the year, get into more details about the CIAA, that conference that just continues to rock and roll, even though they may not be Division I, but yet and still they are. As far as a lot of people are concerned, that's the conference that has the most going on in HBCU basketball. Like I said, I went to the MEAC last year. Hopefully I'll get a chance to go to the CIAA this year. If I do, I will come to you, let you know what's going on. And with that being said, may God bless you. Support your local HBCU, regardless of what you do, regardless of what happened. And just make sure you tell somebody how much you support them. And make sure you love on your kids, love on your family, love on your friends. May God bless you. May God keep you. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Good night.